It's fairly precise, but it doesn't have to be particularly in something like a tokamak. What we do is we produce planar coils, which just mean they're flat, and we situate them. So if you think of a circle like this, what does it produce? If you put current through it, it produces a magnetic field which goes through the circle like this. So if you align many of them like this, there's things online. You can go see the picture. You keep arranging these around in a circle itself. This forces the magnetic field lines to basically just keep executing around like this. So you tend to align. That one tends to, it requires good good alignment. It's not like insane alignment because you're actually exploiting the symmetry of the situation to help it. There's another kind of configuration of this kind of magnetic confinement called a stellarator, which is we have these names for historic reasons.
Which is different than a tokamak.
It's different than a tokamak, but actually works on the same physical principle. That namely, in the end, it produces a plasma which loops in magnetic fields, which loop back on themselves. But in that case, the totality of the confining magnetic field is produced by external three-dimensional magnets, so they're twisted, and it turns out the precision of those is more stringent. Yeah.
So are tokamaks by far more popular for research and development currently than stellarators?
Of the concepts which are there, the tokamak is by far the most mature in terms of its breadth of performance and thinking about how it would be applied in a fusion energy system. And the history of this was that in fact, you asked about if we go back to the history of the Plasma Science and Fusion Center, the history of fusion is that scientists had started to work on this in the 1950s. It was all hush hush and Cold War and all that kind of stuff. And it's like they realized, holy cow, this is like really hard. Like we actually don't really know like what we're doing in this because everything was at low temperatures. They couldn't get confinement. It was interesting. And then they declassified it. And this is one of the few places that the West and the Soviet Union actually collaborated on was the science
even
of this.
During the Cold War.
Even during the middle of the Cold War. It was really... And this actually perpetuates all the way to now. We can talk about the project that is sort of captured in now, but the reason they declassified it was because like everything like kind of like sucked basically, about trying to make this confinement in high temperature plasma, and then the Russians, then the Soviets, right, came along with this device called a tokamak, which is a Russian acronym, which basically means magnetic coils arranged in the shape of a donut. and they said, holy cow, like everyone was stuck at like a meager like 500,000 degrees or 500,000 degrees, which is like in fusion terms is zero basically. And then they come along and they say, oh, we've actually achieved a temperature 20 times higher than everybody else. And it's actually started to make fusion reactions, and everyone just go, oh, no way. It's just hype from this. It's like, there's no way because we failed at this. It's a great story in the history of fusion is that then, but they insisted, said, no, look, you can see this from our data. It's like, this thing is really hot and it seems to be working. This is, late 1960s. And there was a team that went from the United Kingdom's Fusion Development Lab, and they brought this very fancy, amazing new technology called a laser. And they used this laser and they shot the laser beam like through the plasma, and by looking at the scattered light that came from it, they go that basically the scattered light gets more broadened in its spectrum if it gets hotter. So you could exactly tell the temperature of this, and even though you're not physically touching the plasma, it's like, holy cow, you're right, it is like it is 10 million degrees. And so this was one of those explosions of like everyone in the world then wanted to build a tokamak because it was clearly like, wow, this is like so far ahead of everything else that we tried before. So that actually has a part of the story to MIT and the Plasma Science and Fusion Center was why is there a strong fusion and a major fusion program at MIT? It was because we were host to the Francis Bitter Magnet Laboratory, which is also the National High Field Magnet Laboratory. Well, you can see where this goes, right? From this, we're kind of telling the stories backwards almost, but the advent of a tokamak along with the fact that you could make very strong magnetic fields with the technology that had been developed at that laboratory. That was the origins of sort of pushing together the physics of the plasma containment and the magnet technology and put them together in a way that I would say is, a very typical MIT success story, right? We don't do just pure science or pure technology. We sort of set at this intersection between them, and there were several pioneers that of people at MIT, like Bruno Coppi, who's a professor in the physics department, and Ron Parker, who was a professor in electrical engineering and nuclear engineering. It's like even the makeup of the people, right, has got this blends of science and engineering in them, and that's actually was the origin of the Plasma Science and Fusion Center was doing those things. So anyway, so back to this. So yes, tokamaks have achieved the highest in magnetic fusion by far, like the best amounts of these conditions that I talked about, and in fact pushed right up to the point where they were near QP of 1.
Mm-hmm.
They just didn't quite get over 1.
So can we actually just linger on the collaboration across different nations? Just maybe looking at the philosophical aspect of this. Even in the Cold War, there's something hopeful to me besides the energy that these giant international projects are a really powerful way to ease some of the geopolitical tension, even military conflict across nations. There's a war in Ukraine and Russia. There's a brewing tension and conflict with China.
Mm-hmm.
Just the world is still seeking military conflict, cold or hot. What can you say about sort of the lessons of the 20th century in these giant projects in their ability to ease some of this tension?
So it's a great question. So as I said, there was a reason, because it was so hard. That was one of the reasons they declassified it, and actually they started working together in some sense on it as well too. And I think it was really, there was, a heuristic or altruistic aspect to this. It's like, this is something that could change, the future of humanity and its nature and its relationship with energy. Isn't this something that we should work on together? Mm-hmm. Right? And that went along in those ones. And in particularly, that any kind of place where you can actually have an open exchange of people who are sort of at the intellectual frontiers of your society, this is a good thing, right? Of being able to collaborate. I've had an amazing, career. I've worked with people from, it's like hard to throw a dart at a country and on the map and not hit a country of people that I've been able to work with. How amazing is that? And even just getting small numbers of people to bridge the cultural and societal